In the late 1960s, the leader of Czechoslovakia attempted a series of reforms that became known as the Prague Spring, which the people saw as a chance for a more democratic and free society. But the Prague Spring was not to last. In August 1968, the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia and crushed the reforms. Today we're going to be taking a look at the causes, events and consequences of the uprising. Don't forget to stay tuned to the end for the key details you need to pass your exam. Hi there and welcome to The History Teacher. This revision video covers superpower relations and the Cold War, 1941 to 1991, from the GCSE Edexcel 9-1 course. Hopefully you'll also find it useful if you're studying any of the other exam boards, or if, like me, you just love history. Hi there guys, it's all change on the personnel front with new leaders in both superpowers. Following the Berlin Wall and the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev was sacked as leader of the Communist Party and replaced with Leonid Brezhnev. Brezhnev was a member of the Politburo, the highest decision-making body in the Soviet Union, and he was seen as a moderate who could unite the party after the turmoil of Khrushchev's rule. He was also a skilled politician and a veteran of the Soviet military, which gave him the respect of the Soviet people. Over in the USA, President Kennedy was assassinated while in office on the 22nd of November 1963, and so was succeeded by the Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. In 1964, Johnson ran for president in his own right, and he won the election by a landslide. Okay, back to Europe. You will remember that Czechoslovakia had tried to retain its democracy even under communist rule, and was finally forced to become a member of the Warsaw Pact in 1948 after a coup supported by Joseph Stalin. Life in Czechoslovakia had become increasingly difficult. Added to this were the usual Soviet problems of the cost of living. The Czech economy was run by the USSR for the benefit of the USSR. This meant that any wealth or products the Czech factories produced were sent to the USSR rather than benefiting the people of Czechoslovakia. Citizens had to work an average of 5 hours longer than their Western counterparts just to make ends meet. And there were very few consumer products such as radios or clothes available to them. As in other Soviet-controlled countries, there was no freedom of speech, and the media was heavily censored by the state. Also, as in other Soviet countries, the secret police spied on the citizens and people disappeared. The Czech government carried out a series of purges as part of Stalin's purges in the USSR between 1949 and 1955. Victims were anybody vaguely suspected of not supporting the USSR and included democratic politicians, military leaders, Catholics, Jews, people with connections to the West, and even some high-ranking communists. In reality, these purges were designed to rid the USSR and Czechoslovakia of people that Stalin just did not like. Unsurprisingly, by 1966, the people were fed up. Students who were sick of the situation began to protest. They were quickly joined by huge numbers of Czech citizens. The new USSR president, Brezhnev, was concerned that there would not be another problem similar to the one in Hungary, and so looked to replace the unpopular leader of Czechoslovakia, Antonin Novotny, with someone he could trust. Alexander Dubček was a loyal communist and personal friend of Brezhnev. He was committed to the Warsaw Pact and to communism, but didn't believe that it should make people miserable. And so he wanted socialism with a human face. In other words, he wanted people in communist countries to enjoy their lives, to be able to express their views, and to live without fear of the government. So in 1968, Brezhnev made him the leader of the Communist Party in Czechoslovakia. As soon as Dubček took over, he began a series of reforms which became known as the Prague Spring. The reforms were really popular with the Czech people and included the relaxation of censorship and allowing criticism of the government. Trade unions were allowed again and were given new powers, reducing the amount of control the government had over industry. Regional governments were also given more powers, and trade with the West was now encouraged. Finally, the Czech people were given greater freedom to travel abroad. They also discussed the idea of multi-party elections, but this was rejected. These reforms were very popular with the Czech people, but as you can imagine, they were significantly less popular with the Czech communist leaders and with Brezhnev. Dubček, however, was keen to avoid the mistakes made by Nagy in Hungary and was quick to assure Moscow that he had no intention of leaving the Warsaw Pact. However, Brezhnev was really unhappy about the reforms. He thought it gave too much freedom to the people of Czechoslovakia and might lead to other Warsaw Pact countries demanding the same freedoms. Also, don't forget, the reason Khrushchev had built the Berlin Wall was because, given the choice, people didn't want to stay in a communist-led country. So Brezhnev didn't want to give people the freedom to choose. Brezhnev was already having problems with Romania, who were refusing to attend the Warsaw Pact meetings, and with Tito of Yugoslavia, who was refusing to accept orders from Moscow. The last thing Moscow needed was another country causing problems that would further weaken the Warsaw Pact. So, on the 21st of August 1968, approximately 100,000 Warsaw Pact troops invaded Czechoslovakia to crack down on the reforms in Prague. And the Soviet-backed party instituted a period of normalization, which meant reversing the Prague Spring in virtually every way. This led to an immediate end of the reforms and the reintroduction of censorship and political persecution. Some 300,000 Czechs fled to the west before the borders closed. The Czech people could do very little to stop the heavily armed troops, but many still staged protests. The most dramatic protest came on January the 16th, 1969, when student Jan Palach set himself on fire. He lived on for 3 days, even giving interviews before succumbing to his injuries. His death became a symbol of resistance to the Soviet regime. For other members of the Warsaw Pact, the invasion was a clear warning. The Brezhnev Doctrine was published in Pravda, a Soviet newspaper, in September 1968. In it, he said that the actions of a Warsaw Pact nation affected all the other members, and therefore it was the duty of the other nations to act to stop the original nation. In other words, military intervention in any Eastern European country that dissented was justified. This acted as a stark warning to all the other Warsaw Pact members. The Czech people had appealed to the USA to support them against the Soviet invasion, but the USA did very little. They were busy with the Vietnam War and the campaign for civil rights in the USA, and relations with the Soviet Union were beginning to thaw, so they did not want to jeopardize that. The USA did appeal to the UN to pass a motion condemning the actions of the USSR, but unsurprisingly, the USSR vetoed it. Okay, that's everything you need to know about the Prague Spring and its causes and consequences. Let me know in the comments what you think of it, and don't forget to check out my website for worksheets and revision guidance. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.